Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Curry Parker. Welcome to the Understanding Human Design podcast. I'm here today with James Wilson, one of our quantum human design specialists. And we're going to be talking today about actually one of my very, very favorite topics in human design, and that is how do you slay your inner demons? How do you find that place where you can bridge between the struggles that we all are literally designed to have within ourselves? But before we talk about that, we have to kind of unpack the story of James, because you bring with you a very unusual background. So you started off in the Air Force. What else have you done, James?
Yeah, I was enlisted in the Air Force for 6 years, and I was a meteorologist. So even in the service, I mean, that's somewhat of an unconventional route to take early on, although things are changing quite a bit these days, where out of high school, there's so many things you could do. But at that time, it was either college or military for the most part, or work a job. So I joined the service because I wanted to go travel and do something unique. And I was a meteorologist. I was able to travel all over the world and have this really great career that I enjoyed. It's probably one of the best jobs I'll ever have. But I had, as we often do, kind of when our careers are at their crescendo sometimes, like a real crossroads of, do I continue on with this success, or do I follow my soul and my heart, even though I don't know necessarily what it wants to do, but it just seems to be such a deep calling. So I decided to do that instead. And I kind of just fell into the spiritual seeking world by default. That's what it led me to. And I ended up getting into mainstream spirituality, which I didn't know existed. But this was in 2012. And at that time, almost 10 years ago, even the topic of meditation, I mean, if you talk about uncomfortable things to mention to people, that was surprisingly like weird, like looked at you strange, like, what do you mean you meditate? And now it's just commonplace, So I ended up kind of in a mainstream spiritual paradigm again, teaching Transcendental Meditation. Again, lots of success, there's celebrities, and it's great. But again, I was at this crossroads, like, it's all this outer success and accomplishments that are very gratifying to my life and on paper, and I'm grateful that I had them, but still I just had this kind of suffocation feeling of my soul. And in the midst of all of the spiritual seeking, kind of in the early start of it, human design was introduced to me, and I had no idea what it was. I was in somebody's house at this party, and there were crystals all over the walls and candles and everything, and this guy cornered me, and he was telling me how I was a projector and I'm here to not to work and do all these things. And it just kind of stuck with me. And so when I was at another recent crossroads career-wise, and the whole world kind of stopped recently, it was finally this opportunity to really do what I wanted to do, which was work more with human design and embrace my soul and all the discomforts that come with it. And that's really my passion with doing readings for people, is despite the discomforts of daily life, you can still just as much, if not more, awaken into your life. So it's really about your soul expressing itself through your personality and your life, and that integration point.
Absolutely. So, okay. So first of all, I just want to say, because you sort of, I worked for the Air Force, you completely left out. Like, you also worked for NASA, you almost worked for Obama. So you did a lot of amazing things just in that first incarnation. And I think, when you have that much of a, by society's definition, exterior expression of success, I think it was a tremendously unusual thing for you to do, to say, I need to go honor this calling over here and just walk away from all that to go pursue a mainstream spiritual exploration. So I have to tease this out, because I think it's kind of, you said this when we were chatting beforehand, and I was a little bit surprised by this, just because, I have human design blinders on, and I don't always see what it's like in the rest of the world. But you said that human design is counterculture to mainstream spirituality? How is it counterculture to mainstream spirituality?
It's kind of a tricky question because it does depend on your perspective for sure. But within, I guess, how to explain it to our human design community would be, well, there was kind of a branching off from the traditional human design, from the International Human Design School, which I'm still a proponent of. So I'm just like life and soul, I'm always walking both lines as much as possible. So there's more of the conventional, traditional human design, where and similar with Transcendental Meditation, which was more of the mainstream spiritual paradigm that I was involved in. I don't really consider it a departure so much. It's just more of what I was called to do, because those have their value in that if you're wanting to learn like by the book, like the traditional way, because when you do get counterculture, it can get a little bit diffuse and people can write blogs about information in any way they want. You know, so there's a value for both. And I don't know if we mentioned the paradox and where I like to work from coaching, but
dive right in.
I find this to be the paradox of countercultures. This is kind of where I like to live. I like to be able to infuse my own life into it, and mainly because I feel really strongly about staying ahead of the collective shifts, and I just see how mainstream anything, it needs to change with the times, and so it needs to be able to evolve. And I give this disclaimer in my readings that I feel really passionate about, because I think what prevented the growth of spiritual paradigms in the past was it was innocent and it served its purpose, but like a power distance with gurus and disciples, because whenever you have that relationship, there's a power distance. So I really like to promote the idea of mutuality, that we're all in it together. We need to learn together.
I love that. I am a big proponent of mutuality. And also, I always question, like, how can somebody, I mean, to me, this is sort of the interesting paradox of human design. Here you have a system whose end goal is to teach you how to connect to your own authority. How can you, it's so difficult to walk in the community of human design as a leader without saying, I'm leading, but you lead you and I'll lead me. Because I can't lead you, really. I can say, here are some possible paths you could follow, but you have to figure out which one is yours. And it might not be any of the ones that I'm showing you, and that's okay. It's tricky.
And that is why I feel so much freedom in being able to work with people with human design, because I don't have to know the answer. And in fact, I usually never do. So egoically, it's challenging because I have to kind of put myself in this place like I don't really know what's best for anybody. But at the same time, that really frees me up to live my own life and have my own inner authority that I can follow. But like you said, it's all these tools and abilities to point people in their unique direction. So they kind of wake up to their own life as opposed to subconsciously following somebody else's. So if authority specific, like that word alone is powerful to tell somebody they have their own inner authority. So that alone is really great to start with. And then getting into more of the depth of the inner experience is really just being able to look at somebody's chart with them in real time, because the inner experience for all of us is so incredibly subjective. Like it's the most subjective thing possible. But it's almost like a window into that world to look into somebody's subjective experience and have them share it with you and kind of bring it to the forefront. And it's just, I really love it.
So you brought up something that is something that I don't find that people talk about a lot in human design, but it is actually, I think, the thing that people have the biggest questions about when they're looking for a reading. You know, people don't come for a reading because they're curious. Usually I find people want a reading because there's something in their life or on their internal plane that just isn't working, and they don't understand why it's not working. And you call this the core paradox, which I love that phrase. I tend to call it that your inner conundrum. But
Same thing.
there's a conundrum there, a paradox between the life and the soul. How do you help people bridge between those, sometimes what feels like these two really divergent parts of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I have some ways that I approach it, but how it actually plays out in real time with somebody, we're all so different, and we all have different. Well, so we all have a different inner. What's the term you use? Inner conflict, conundrum. Conundrum, yeah. So conundrum and paradox. Conundrum would be like almost like something's wrong. There's some sort of conflict. I mean, that does seem, we don't talk about it much, but everybody kind of walks around with this feeling of there's something fundamentally wrong with me, and it's not okay to talk about. But I like to bring that out in the open. It's a little bit challenging at first sometimes, but when you bring it out in the open, then you're able to talk about it. So that's a conundrum. And then you can see deeper layers of it that really it on the surface, it's a conundrum, but that's why I like to call it a paradox, because it's something that, a paradox is something that, what's the definition? It seems contradictory, like it's this apparent contradiction, but in reality, it presents a possible truth. So it opens this window to like, actually, this is the truth of the human experience, that we're kind of this walking paradox of a life and a soul, in that there's a growing recognition to speak about it in terms of, we know that we're infinite, divine, cosmic beings, but we're also incredibly finite and limited. And so I find that to rephrase the question completely, because there's, in the seeking, it's who am I? And that can be a conundrum in itself, because I feel like two different people.
Yeah.
Because you kind of are, in a sense, like your life and your soul they're diametrically opposed to each other oftentimes, not always, but the idea is to bring them into alignment and integrate them. But I forget what I was saying.
So the two parts and how to bring them together.
Oh, you talk about it and you work with it. And again, there's no one way. Everyone's got their own path. So that's where mutuality is so important, that people usually tell me what it is, and then I can go, oh, okay, that sounds right. As long as they're excited about it and it's liberating. But it's just getting over these little obstacles of, it's difficult. Oh, I remember it was rephrasing the question. So of who am I? Because that's such a difficult question. And I kind of joke that no one will ever figure it out, because there's no end to it as far as who you ultimately are. But a way you can reframe it, I found, is asking, what am I? And I find that if you stop to ask that question first, it's like, oh, I never really understood or was taught or was told what a human being is. So that's kind of the awkward part of going, actually, I don't really know what it means to be human. And that's okay, because it's an ever evolving process to understand what it means. But when you put it into objective terms like that, a human being is kind of a walking paradox. And there's no guide on how to be a person. And the human design is the closest thing I found to that, like a user manual for this is kind of what's going on internally, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, as you said that, I was thinking, even the phrase human being is kind of it's a weird phrase. It's like, how are you a human being? and as we know from human design too, the definition of what it means to be a human is always evolving. Who we were, even the amount of sovereignty we had over who we perceived ourselves to be 300, 400 years ago is very different than the level of sovereignty that many of us have, not everyone, but on the planet yet, but many of us have a certain degree of sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. So when you do readings where you really support clients in focusing on this core paradox of how do you integrate this infinite soul purpose that has, I always joke that your soul is like, I know how to build universes and planets, and then you get stuck in this teeny tiny little body. And it's
Right.
like, what am I supposed to do? I have to go to the grocery store now. So how do you integrate that's your focus, is really looking at how you integrate these bigger aspects and understandings who you are or what you are into your human story with human design.
So how do I support people in bringing out more of their divine soul purpose into their life?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it ultimately starts with simply bringing awareness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is the non-doing or the non-action component of it, because I think part of the reason we're not able to put much attention or awareness on it is because the world is so fast-paced and tells us constantly what we're supposed to do, and can take us out of any path we have that we thought was our own.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that it kind of evolves on its own if you allow it to be. And I suppose the term human being would be appropriate there, because if you simply be, I feel pretty confident that it happens on its own simply by walking through the path of the life that was intended for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's asking that question, are you following the life that's intended for you? If not, how can you do that more? And then all of the mechanics of the chart, I think, really come in handy to give talking points to that, rather than just telling someone to just be, because that doesn't last very long sometimes. So I think one good place of reference starting out, if you have no idea about human design, but you have this general idea that I'm this expansive soul that is capable of doing anything, is the talk around the open centers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, can be an uncomfortable area to go into, because I give a lot of disclaimers about what the open centers mean, because
Mm-hmm.
people can hate their open centers when it's misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
But that mechanic of, here's a place in you that's completely open sometimes, and it's capable of hypothetically taking in infinite amounts of energy,
Mm-hmm.
to whatever extent that means, because infinite is, that can mean anything. But you're limited by your physiology, like your physical ability to hold that amount of energy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a huge understanding for people. It's just to be able to say, oh, I'm not all of this that I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing it. And I think that's,
Yeah.
a good beginning to sort of quantify and qualify what's going through you as you walk through this world. So
Mm-hmm.
so I have a personal question for you, because
Sure.
you have a son.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering, now that you have this perspective, how has this shifted your viewpoint on the world through the lens of being a father?
Well, in general, becoming a father has shifted my perspective on just about everything. I mean, it's given me endless purpose. So I really don't question purpose anymore. It's made my life incredibly simple in a lot of ways, because I feel that there's only one thing that I ultimately have to do, and that's just be a good father, which is one of the toughest jobs in the world. So it's a tall order. But in terms of human design, it's another reason why it was easy for me to kind of shift career paths into doing this, because it answered that. I don't know. I guess that's the intuitive thing. I don't know why. But I felt that this is what I need to be doing for him. And I might find that out later of why. But currently, being able to understand the intricacies of his chart more, especially when I work one-on-one with other people, is like I kind of have him in perspective most of the time. And if somebody has gates activated that he has, like, I remember that because they're going to come up in his life, it seems. So the more intimately that I understand the nuances of his chart, the more I'll understand him. And I see, it's inexplicable, but I kind of see how our two charts together, when I have glimpses of what my future will entail, what I hope for his future as well, I kind of see why he came to me specifically. Like why I was meant to be his dad. Like I'm here to teach him certain things. He's here to teach me certain things too.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So your website is evolvinghumandesign.com. So if people want to connect with you and get a reading and focus on interpreting their core paradox and getting to the foundation of their human design, they can contact you at evolvinghumandesign.com. Anything else you want to add to that, or any other way that they can connect with you?
One of the best ways to connect with me is through Instagram. And recently in the social media world, thanks to some support from other people. And I've enjoyed it quite a bit, actually. So if you send me a DM in Instagram, my handle is, what is it? It's James Wilson. It's my first name _ evolving HD on Instagram.
Cool. So on Instagram, it's at James Wilson _ evolving HD. And again, evolvinghumandesign.com is your website. You guys, it's such a treat to talk to you. You have such a beautiful and broad and deep perspective. I really appreciate our conversation, and thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me.